In the quiet suburbs of Portland, Oregon, the night of May 17, 2017, seemed like any other. Neighbors closed their blinds, families prepared for bed, and streetlights flickered against the cool mist rolling in from the Willamette River. But by dawn, the neighborhood would be transformed into the center of a murder mystery that no one, least of all the police, seemed prepared to solve. At 6:43 a.m., a jogger stumbled upon a grisly scene in Jefferson Park. Lying face down in the damp grass was a young woman, no more than 25 years old. Her hoodie torn and her phone shattered a few feet away. The jogger froze, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights painted the park in chaos. The victim was soon identified as Emily Carter, a 24-year-old barista and aspiring graphic designer. Friends described her as shy but kind, someone who loved sketching late into the night and sharing her art online. She wasn't famous, she wasn't wealthy, and she wasn't controversial, which made one chilling question echo louder. Why her? The Portland Police Bureau launched an immediate investigation. Detectives canvassed the area, knocking on doors, reviewing surveillance footage from nearby homes, and tracing Emily's last known movements. According to her roommate, she had left the apartment around 9:30 p.m. the night before, saying she wanted to clear her head with a walk after a long shift. She never came back. The evidence was frustratingly thin. No witnesses saw or heard anything unusual. The shattered phone offered no new leads, just texts between Emily and a friend discussing plans for the weekend. Her wallet was still in her pocket, ruling out robbery. Forensic teams found no fingerprints, no DNA, no tire tracks. Just the body of a young woman, a life extinguished without reason. Detectives grew frustrated. Days turned into weeks, and still no suspect, no motive, and no solid evidence emerged. Local news outlets ran stories with titles like "Brutal Murder in Portland Park Still Unsolved" and "Police Baffled by Killing of Young Barista." The community grew restless, fear spreading like wildfire. Parents no longer let their children walk alone. Night joggers abandoned the park. And yet, despite all the resources, the case stalled. The files sat heavy on the desks of investigators, who could do little more than wait for a break. But what no one in law enforcement expected was that the break wouldn't come from the lab, or the streets, or even an eyewitness. Instead, it would come from the last place they'd ever look, a Reddit thread buried deep in the internet's true crime community. The murder that would shake a community and later ignite one of the most intense online investigations began in the most unsettling way, quietly. It was a cool autumn evening in a small U.S. town. The leaves had begun to fall, painting the sidewalks in burnt orange and deep reds. Families had already settled into their nightly routines. But on this night, neighbors noticed something unusual. The lights in one particular house burned late into the evening, and a sense of unease hung in the air. Inside that home, a tragedy had unfolded. A young woman, let's call her Emily Carter, a 27-year-old teacher loved by her students, was found brutally murdered. She had failed to show up to work, which was unlike her. Concerned colleagues reached out, and when the police conducted a welfare check, they stumbled upon a scene straight out of a nightmare. Emily had been attacked in her own living room. The signs of struggle were clear: overturned furniture, shattered glass, and evidence that she had fought for her life. Yet, chillingly, there was no forced entry. Whoever had killed her had either been let in willingly or already had access to her home. The news of Emily's death rippled through the community like wildfire. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers were devastated. People asked the same questions over and over. Who could have done this? Why Emily? The police quickly launched an investigation. They questioned friends and family, dug into her phone records, and canvassed the neighborhood. But despite their efforts, the trail was murky. The official updates from law enforcement were vague. Detectives urged patience, but whispers began to spread. Some said it looked like a crime of passion. Others speculated it might have been a stalker. The lack of solid answers left the town restless and fearful. As the days stretched into weeks, frustration grew, not just locally but online. Articles about the case began circulating, and the mystery of Emily Carter's murder caught the attention of a particular corner of the internet: Reddit's true crime community. These digital detectives were no strangers to cold cases. Many had backgrounds in criminology, law, or tech, while others were simply passionate amateurs. They thrived on puzzling through evidence, connecting dots, and digging where official investigations sometimes stalled. On Reddit, a new thread emerged under the title, "Unsolved Murder: Who Killed Emily Carter?" What began as a handful of users speculating soon turned into thousands of strangers united in a common mission: uncovering the truth. Some began dissecting the timeline of Emily's last known movements. Others cross-referenced old social media posts, tracking potential suspects through likes, comments, and hidden connections. And in the midst of it all, one detail stood out: a chilling Facebook post that would soon change everything. Emily's murder wasn't just another headline anymore. It was becoming the internet's case to solve. And the deeper Redditors dug, the more the police realized they weren't the only ones hunting a killer. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. For weeks, the police investigation into the young woman's murder seemed frozen. Leads dried up, tips went nowhere, and the press quietly shifted focus to other crimes in the city. But on Reddit, the case was far from dead. In fact, it was just heating up. One user, known only by the handle TruthSeeker89, posted a detailed timeline of events using news reports, witness statements, and even obscure forum threads. Unlike police press releases, this timeline didn't just list facts, it connected the dots. It mapped out the victim's last known movements, highlighted inconsistencies in the neighbors' testimonies, and pinpointed a specific 3-hour window where the murder could have taken place. The community buzzed. Hundreds of users poured in with fresh observations. Someone dug up an old Instagram post where a man living in the same neighborhood had commented cryptically on the victim's picture months earlier. People hide their true selves in plain sight. Another user uncovered court records of the same man tied to a prior assault charge that police had seemingly overlooked. The discussion grew more intense when users compared photos from the crime scene coverage to Google Street View images. Sharp-eyed members noticed that a distinctive red truck seen parked near the victim's home around the time of the murder matched one parked in front of the suspect's house. This was no longer idle speculation, it was a pattern. And the internet had found it before law enforcement even realized there was a suspect worth pursuing. But with the breakthrough came a dark side. Some Redditors took it too far, harassing innocent neighbors and publicly posting names that had nothing to do with the crime. Mods scrambled to delete false accusations, trying to keep the thread grounded in facts, not conspiracy theories. Still, the breakthrough was undeniable. For the first time, the victim's family felt a flicker of hope. The community wasn't just keeping her story alive, they were pushing the case forward. And then came the moment that changed everything. A Redditor claimed to have found a deleted Facebook post from the suspect, dated the night of the murder. The post read, "Some things can't be undone." It was enough to make even the police pay attention. The digital trail was no longer just a hunch, it was evidence. By the time the local police caught wind of the Reddit threads, the online community had already built a case stronger than any official press conference. The suspect's name, his vehicle, his troubling past, and even his cryptic posts were all neatly cataloged and dissected by strangers across the globe. At first, investigators dismissed it. Law enforcement often views online sleuthing as reckless, a dangerous mix of obsession and misinformation. But as one detective quietly admitted to a reporter off record, they were seeing things we should have caught. Pressure mounted. The victim's family, armed with printouts of Reddit timelines and screenshots of suspicious social media posts, marched into the precinct demanding action. News outlets began covering the internet manhunt, painting the police as slow and unprepared while Redditors were hailed as tireless investigators. Reluctantly, detectives revisited the suspect. This time, they took his digital footprint seriously. A search warrant was issued. Inside his home, police found the final piece of the puzzle: bloody clothes hidden in a storage box, DNA that matched the victim. When the arrest was announced, it was the internet that broke the story before the local press. The subreddit lit up with celebration. People who had never met the victim or each other shared a collective victory. They had kept her story alive and refused to let her killer slip away. But the ending wasn't all triumphant. Ethical questions lingered. How close had the community come to ruining innocent lives with their speculation? Should digital vigilantes ever be the ones driving a murder investigation? And perhaps the hardest truth, would the case have ever been solved without them? In the end, justice was served. The suspect confessed, his conviction secured with both digital breadcrumbs and physical evidence. The family finally had closure. Yet this case left behind an unsettling reality. In the digital age, the line between law enforcement and online detectives has blurred. Sometimes, it takes a crowd of strangers behind computer screens to uncover what those with badges and authority miss. The internet had solved a murder before the cops did, and the world would never look at true crime the same way again. The trial that followed was swift, but what made headlines wasn't just the guilty verdict. It was the role Reddit played in shaping the case. Journalists filled the courtroom, not just to cover the suspect's fate, but to ask the bigger question. Had justice been delivered by the courts or by the internet? For the victim's family, it didn't matter. What mattered was that their daughter's story hadn't been buried beneath red tape and forgotten reports. Without those people online, my daughter's killer might still be out there, her mother said tearfully outside the courthouse. But for police departments across the country, the case was a wake-up call. Training manuals were quietly rewritten. Digital footprints, once seen as secondary, began to take center stage in homicide investigations. A generation of detectives could no longer ignore the power of online collaboration. Reddit itself was divided. Some users basked in the victory, their usernames now etched into a kind of digital folklore. Others grew uneasy, wondering if the next case might not end so cleanly, that a wrong accusation could destroy someone's life forever. The power of the crowd, after all, cuts both ways. Years later, this case still echoes in conversations about digital justice. It's cited in documentaries, taught in criminal justice courses, and debated in ethics forums. One lesson stands out above all. Truth can hide in plain sight, waiting for anyone, to connect the dots. And so, the story closes where it began. A small subreddit, an unsolved crime, and strangers across the world who refused to look away. They weren't police. They weren't detectives. They were ordinary people with laptops and determination. But together, they did the impossible, solved a murder before the cops did. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell.